In this episode, I'm going to cover decreasing the permutation build count for a GXT application. So to start, I'll compile an app with less permutations, both with collapse properties and set properties, and show the differences. So to get started, I'm going to go to my application, and I have a simple application. It doesn't really matter how big it is. The same compile process works for both. So I'm going to look for my GWT module descriptor, and in this case I have a Maven application. And in this Maven application, I have a module descriptor under source main Java, and I've already brought in what I recommend the default collapse properties are. And you can find this in the permutation guide on the GXT docs or in the GXT docs. So what I want to do is start off with the default compile and show a compile without these collapse properties and show you how many permutations it will compile to start with. And it's going to be a lot more than when it compiles with a collapsed property. And I'll explain this a little bit more detail in a moment. So I'm going to remove these with Command Cut, and then I'm going to go up to the launcher icon. This is a debug as launcher. And so I see that I don't have a compile here. Since it's a Maven project, I could run a Maven install here. Or what I can do is right click on my project and go debug as GWT compiler. And that will start a compile instance or compile process. I'm going to click OK here because I want to save this before I compile it. OK. And here it is, the compiling output. It's going to take a moment to figure out which properties to compile for. So I'm going to move this view down to the bottom by going over to the right here and restoring the view to the bottom. And I'm going to fast forward this until the compiling is done and show you the compile count. Okay, so the compiler is going to compile 48 permutations in this build. Okie dokie. It has finished compiling the 47 or 48 permutations because it starts with 0. And I see that it took 327 seconds, and that may seem like a long time for a simple application. But we're compiling for the smallest footprint based on permutations. And I'll show you a little bit more context of how the permutations are decided or how the permutation builds look in a moment. So what I want to do is replace what I just removed and collapse properties. So for instance, for the GXT device, there's 3 properties. Or 3 values. That'll be desktop, tablet, and phone. Well, in this case, what I'm saying here is to compile both the tablet and phone permutation together. So that means this will be the phone tablet permutation or phone tablet build, and there will be a build for the desktop, and that will be compared or correlated with the other permutations. There'll be combinations here. Okay, so what I want to do is save this, and then I'm going to run the compile process again and show you how many permutations are decreased. Okay, so I'm going to go to the top and run or rerun the launcher for the compiler, and you can see the green icon here. Just let me go and show the debug configurations. When I right-clicked on the project and ran it, it created a launcher. I could do that again and I will rerun this launcher here, or I could just go up to the shortcut and run it again. And I'm going to fast forward this to the end of the process again. Okay, in this case, it's going to compile 14 permutations, not 48. So collapsing the properties just decreased the permutation count by quite a bit. Okay, it looks like it almost took half the time to compile 14 permutations. So that's great. That's one way to decrease the permutations. But let's say I wanted to speed up the process even more. Well, what I could do is actually set the permutations I'm compiling for, but keep in mind there is a caveat to this, and that is a device could load up your application, or deferred binding may not be able to find a permutation to match the build, and I'm not going to cover that process. Just keep in mind that when you set properties, things can fail, and what you want to do is test all the devices and browsers that you're going to run your application on and make sure there's a fallback policy for that. And one thing to ask, you could ask support to show you how the generator works in the rebind. You can override that, how permutations and properties are built and discovered with deferred binding. I won't cover that in this episode, but that's an advanced topic you could ask support for. So to get going, what I want to do is start by setting a property. For instance, let's say I only wanted to compile for the desktop. So let's say desktop. I'm going to put desktop here as the value, so GXT device. Instead of collapsing that property, what I'm going to go over here and set property. And it doesn't take values, it takes one value. So I'm going to compile just for the desktop. Okay, so I don't need this commented out string, so I'm going to remove it. And for GXT user, let's set a property here. I'm going to limit the permutations that are compiled for this for value. And let's say, okay, so GXT user agent, I'm going to say Chrome. And for the user agent, I'm going to say set property. And user agent, that's GWT's user agent. So I'm going to say Safari because that would be similar or the same as Chrome. Okay, I forgot to remove the S. Remove the S, that fixes it. And for GXT user agent, this is a duplicate. And this is a duplicate. How many permutations would compile if I have the GXT device desktop, GXT user agent Chrome, and user agent Safari? So let me save this. And I'm going to run the compile process again. Up here, I'm going to run the launcher, and that will launch the compiler process. And I'm going to fast forward this to the end again. Okay, it's much faster. It's only going to compile one permutation, and it starts with 0, and it took 17 seconds. So it dramatically sped up the entire process to compile only for Chrome. Now you could switch, let's say you are in development and you're testing on a particular device or browser, you could have something that swaps this out. You could do that in the build plan, or you could probably do that in the launcher configuration as well. So what I want to do is show you another tip to figure out how you could derive and delineate which properties are being compiled for. So I'm going to revert back to the earlier configuration where it was only, I think it was 14 properties. So let me go back. I'm going to save that. What I want to do next is go up to the compiler configuration, debug configurations, and here's the compiler launcher. I could rename it, say, this is my app compiler here, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to go over to arguments. I'm going to go to the beginning here, and I want to go compile. Whoops, there's some automation here that Eclipse is doing that's causing an error. So I'm going to go to the end of info because this is actually bound with this here log level. So you could probably email the admin or file an issue for that, but I'm not going to do that right at the moment. So let's go. Oh, what is it that I put here? How would I know what the options are? Well, let me go to that. I already have it loaded here in the background. In the Eclipse plugin docs, I have the entry points, and here's the compiler entry point. So I'm going to select on it. And I have the arguments that you could trigger here listed. So what I want to do is copy the compile report argument. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to add that to this here because it's just going to turn it on. This is going to set it to true. And this will add a compiler report. And I'll show what that is in a minute. So I'm going to hit apply, just double check. Okay, I'm ready to go. I'm going to hit debug. And I'm going to fast forward to the end of this process. Okay, so the process has finished compiling. I can see that it took 203 seconds and it did 14 permutations. But what I want to show you this time, I'm going to refresh my project here and just make sure the directory contents are updated. So where is that? All right, refresh. Okay, so I'm going to open up extras. It went into the root. Well, if I use the, let me just show that. I'm going to go to the POM configuration. It goes to the overview tab. So I'm going to select the POM tab, and I'm going to go down to the GWT plugin. So if you're going to compile with Maven, you could do the same thing, but you got to go to the GWT plugin. And this depends on which GWT plugin. There's two Maven plugins. In this case, it's simply you can go compiler report. I can do control space or command space for quick assist, and I'm going to look for a compiler report, and I can set this to true. So this would be the same thing as going up to the launcher arguments for Eclipse. So in this case, I'm going to remove that for this project because I'm not going to run the Maven process in this example. You could do that by going right-clicking on this and going debug as or run as Maven install and have that set to or the compiler report set to true, and it would do the same thing. And extras would then be in the target directory, and you would also see that in the output. So if I look down here, it says writing extras, and it shows me the location it's writing to, and that's the root of my project. So in this case, I'm going to right click and go refresh, and you can change extras to a different directory if you want. But in this case, I'm just going to go refresh and look at extras, and here's my module name, and I'm going to look in the SOYC report and compiler report. And what I want to do is look for index, and there it is. So what I want to do is right click on this and open with a web browser. So open with, let's say, web browser. Okay, so I'm going to minimize the bottom view, and here we go. Here's permutation 0, and here's all the combinations of properties for this permutation. So I can say, okay, for GXT device, here's desktop. I compiled for desktop. Well, the GXT user agent, I could have set that to Edge or Chrome like I did earlier. And I just want to go through this real quick because I think you get the idea here. Permutation 3, here's a different combination. It's going to do for a GXT device for phone, and then the combination of the properties are going to be different for each permutation. And I'm not going to cover how this is boiled down, but you can just see the permutations here. So this gives you a good tool to delineate how the permutations are built. So if I changed it back to what I did earlier, maybe I'd only see one permutation with all the or with just 3 properties. Okay, so to review, I'm going to go back to the module descriptor, GWT module descriptor, and just look at, so that there's 2 options here. 1, I can collapse a property, and 2, I can set the property. Now keep in mind, when you set a property, things can go awry. So just look at all the browsers that you expect your application to load in and verify it works. If it doesn't, you can contact support and ask for options, or you can look at the property report for or permutations and properties in the compiler metrics report. So that's it. All I wanted to cover today on decreasing the permutation count in the compiler. Thanks for watching. Follow me for more tips and tricks on GXT, and I'll catch you later.